Discussion, city attorney overview of procedures. Matt, why don't you highlight it for us and let us know what we're doing, how much and when, please.
Sure, no problem. So this is a public hearing conducted pursuant to the requirements of section 447.4034C Florida statutes in order for the city council, acting in its capacity as a legislative body, to resolve two issues at impasse between the city and the Coastal Florida PDA, representing a group of police lieutenants employed by the city's police department. By way of background, the city and the PDA engaged in negotiations for a successor collective bargaining agreement that expired on October 1, 2023. The city and the PDA were able to reach tentative agreements on all articles except for two, Article 24 wages and Article 25 retirement plan. An impasse was declared by PDA. The PDA's impasse declaration invoked the procedures for resolving impasses set forth in 447.4034 statutes. A special magistrate was appointed by the Florida Public Employee Relations Commission to conduct a hearing and render a recommendation to resolve the issues at impasse. A special magistrate hearing was held on February 13, 2024, and the special magistrate issued her written recommendation on March 28, 2024. The city thereafter timely rejected the recommendations of the special magistrate. As required by Florida statutes, the city manager forwarded to the city council a copy of the special magistrate's recommendations, along with the city manager's recommendations to resolve the two impasse issues. The city council likewise received from the PDA its recommendations for resolving the two impasse issues. This hearing is being conducted for the parties to explain their positions with respect to the two impasse issues and the rejected recommendations of the special magistrate. It is not an evidentiary hearing. No testimony or evidence will be taken. Each side, the city and the PDA, will be permitted 15 minutes each to present to city council their positions on the two impasse issues. Since the PDA declared impasse, they will be asked to present first, followed by the city. At the conclusion of the two presentations, the city council members will be afforded the opportunity to ask questions of the city and the PDA. There will then be a period for public participation. The usual rules for public participation in terms of time limits for speakers will be followed. Following public participation, the city council will deliberate in public and vote to resolve the impasse issues as it deems to be in the best interest of the public, including the interest of the public employees involved. That's all.
Okay. We have set a time limit on the presentations, Matt?
15 minutes.
Okay. And we're going to have the clock set accordingly, so we'll record both sides. Who do we have presenting for the PDA?
Sir, Greg Corhan, speaking on behalf of your lieutenants. Lieutenant Warren Carmen here, who has the personal knowledge and might be able to answer some questions. Mayor, Councilman, City Manager, after this evening. First thing that I'd like to explain is essentially both sides are coming asking for you to rule on their behalf. I want the City Council to understand that the only issue that we're going to dispute at this time is the wage article. We are no longer going to be asking for the pension changes, so we will save that time and let you know that up front. But I would like to let you know that your decision is not an either or. You're essentially to do what you believe is in the best interest of the city, and if you decide that the wage offer should be somewhere in between, you are free to do that. Next, I want you to understand what your decision here today will end up leading to. Your decision today will be on what the wages will be for the remainder of the fiscal year that started last October, that will run through the end of this September. Now, however you decide on that issue, the parties are going to go back, plug that into everything else they agreed to, and then put it to a contract vote, just as if we had reached an agreement at the bargaining table. If the city and the union both voted up, we have a contract and we're done. Our wage offer is for 2 years. We come here today not asking for the pension changes because we hope to get a 2-year deal done. If the city is willing to come to where we are at as far as our wage ask for years 1 and year 2, we can get a 2-year deal done. I'll be honest, I don't think we have any chance at all if you overrule the special magistrate's recommendation, if you will, and just go with the city's decision. The chances of it being approved by your 5 lieutenants is pretty much nil, and we are going to be back at the bargaining table we'd love to get this done and get a 2-year deal done and be able to move on. The third issue, and it's a very contentious issue, is the issue of retro pay. I understand that the city has not given retro pay in the past. I want you to understand how your employees feel about that subject. We negotiated for a very, very long time. There were good negotiations by both sides, sometimes a little contentious, but always respectful. There were often delays in scheduling negotiation sessions, but we didn't rush to declare impasse. We gave it every chance we could to get it resolved. Sometimes the parties can't reach that agreement. But it is strongly viewed that when the city manager's position is no retro back pay, one, well, when we go back to the negotiating table right away, we're going to be much quicker to clear impasse and cause both sides to go through that, because the officers tried as hard as they could to reach a resolution, and they shouldn't be punished for that long effort by saying no retro back pay. I assume everybody was able to receive both the recommendation of the union and the city, and that you also had a chance to read the special magistrate's decision. The officers do feel strongly that they're here because they thought their ask was fair in relation to both the local market for lieutenant wages and also compared to what other city employees got as far as raises in their bargaining units this last time around. Throughout the negotiations, the city only wanted to look at base pay, but at the end of the day, as anyone will tell you that gets a paycheck, what matters is what's the total compensation package. The city also, in their exhibit, in their memorandum and the recommendation, they point out one stat. It's the 9.7% increase in the bargaining unit members' base pay, which is their offer. Again, they look at only base pay and they only give you a percentage stat. I'm here to fill you in on the other factors that we think are crucial that support our position and the recommendation of the special magistrate to go ahead and give these officers what is asked for in Appendix A to the union filing. First, the numbers that the city looked at for base pay were essentially from 2022, which is 2 years out of date. So when you go, hey, look how much money these officers are asking for now, it's not exactly apples to oranges, because many of these agencies, including Daytona Beach, that gives 2 raises a year, have received several more raises since the numbers you saw that the city offered. The two valid comparators are Daytona Beach and the Volusia County Sheriff's Department. The special magistrate agreed. They're all in the same county. They're all essentially contiguous to the city of Port Orange. And they also all have a similar environment. You guys truly are much closer to a Daytona Beach than you are to a DeLand. When looking at the pay numbers for the Volusia County Sheriff's Office, the average county lieutenant salary again, we're talking 2022, was approximately $94,000. Again, that's base salary. The other factors that must be considered to make a fair comparison are, one, the Volusia County Sheriff's Department lieutenants only work a 2,080 hour schedule, yearly schedule, compared to the Port Orange police lieutenants who work a 2,184 hour schedule. Additionally, so there's 104 hours there that they additionally work. The lieutenants also working for the county receive a $4,500 annual stipend for working as shift commanders that the Port Orange lieutenants don't. And again, that goes back to why a proper comparison is between you and DCSO and Daytona Beach. You're a large enough agency that your lieutenants work as shift commanders. Some of the small agencies they don't work as shift commanders. So right up front, when you take that $94,000, essentially you've got to add $4,500 to it because the deputies get that stipend for working as shift commanders, which your lieutenants also work as but don't receive. Next, you've got to look at the pension. Pension contributions for the county lieutenants under FRS is 3% of their wages. Port Orange lieutenants contribute 7.5% to their pension. Again, there's another 4% of their income which has to be considered when you're looking at numbers, not just base salary. Another very large benefit that the county receives that your lieutenants don't is a family medical coverage is covered 100% by the county. The city of Port Orange doesn't provide benefits for their and we're talking about lieutenants. When you talk about new police officers, most of them aren't married, most of them don't have dependents, it's not a big issue. By the time you reach lieutenant, the vast majority of them are married people with families, and that under the system that the city offers, I understand you offer 3 plans, the average is another $7,000 per year. So when you look at the $94,000 that a lieutenant made in the county back in 2022, when you add on another 4.5% because of the contribution percentage, another $4,500 for the shift commander stipend, and then another $7,000 for the family medical coverage, you see that once you take into consider the total package, the city really isn't competitive anymore in lieutenant wages salaries. Daytona Beach is even worse. Daytona, honestly, has the best paid lieutenants in the county. On April 2nd, 2023, when they received one of their 2-a-year pay raises, their average pay rate for lieutenants went up to $108,414.53 annually, okay? But that's not even close to being where they stop, because lieutenants in Daytona Beach get to earn overtime, but your lieutenants do not. And more importantly, even your own sergeants here in Port Orange get to earn overtime. The Daytona Beach lieutenants also work a 20-80 hour schedule, which means if they work the extra 104 hours to work the same number of hours as a lieutenant in Port Orange, they're getting 104 more hours at overtime rate. Port Orange, quite frankly, has no other non-base salary benefit that is superior to Daytona Beach. And Daytona Beach is your closest, most comparable city. The local market is clear. Lieutenants are being paid better elsewhere, but I'll be brutally honest, which is not too many lieutenants change positions. Change agencies. Usually you've made lieutenant, you're far enough in an agency, you're not going anywhere. But you've got to consider the fact that some, including the city of Cocoa, is hiring people from other agencies to work as lieutenants. They recently hired a sergeant to come in as a lieutenant in the city of Cocoa. So even though it may not affect your current lieutenants, the bottom line is you've got qualified officers that are working their way up the ranks that go, maybe it's better for me to go somewhere else now, because by the time I make lieutenant, I'm not going to realistically be able to go somewhere else. And if they're not going to keep the lieutenant's wage salary competitive, they might go somewhere else. There's another important comparison, again, along that lines is how are they doing compared to the rest of your city employees? I understand that every city wants to be fair to all their employees. But I need to give you the reasons for why the lieutenant's ask is higher than the other bargaining units for the base salary, which is pretty much what these lieutenants get, and why it's fair. First, the lieutenants in 2021 and 2022, there was a longevity bonus given of over $9,000 per year to,
$500 per year of service. Each of the lieutenants lost $92,500 on average, $9,250 per year. So $18,500 over 2 years per lieutenant.
right, and that was a longevity bonus in 2021 and 2022 that the city did allow the lieutenants to participate in. Now, again, if the city wants to be fair across the board, if there are times when you think, nope, the lieutenant shouldn't be allowed to participate, and you let other units doing it, then there should be times when you give a benefit to the lieutenants that don't go to somebody else. The city also gave a mid-contract raise to the rank and file bargaining unit of $1.95 per hour, and again, the lieutenants were not given that raise. What that's doing is obviously wage compression. We all know what that leads to. The other factor that I want you to understand, that $1.95 per hour, when you look at the city's numbers showing we gave this bargaining unit this percentage increase and that one that percentage increase, they didn't include that $1.95 increase that was given to the rank and file bargaining unit that wasn't given to lieutenants. The city also came asking for basically numerous pension changes for the policemen's union that don't benefit your lieutenants. The reason being, you guys have a two-step pension system because of the Great Recession back in 2010. Your lieutenants are all members of the first level, and the pension changes that the city came to us with didn't benefit your lieutenants in any way. But again, the city gave those pension benefit changes to the rank and file unit, but gave nothing to the lieutenants. I'm going to leave you with what I think is the most critical point for you as the city leaders to ponder when deciding whether or not to give the lieutenants what they're asking for at the bargaining table today. And that's based on the current situation. It is very likely that during the current fiscal year that all of your sergeants will take home more money than all of your lieutenants. And you have to ask yourself, why would anybody want to be promoted to lieutenant if it's going to mean a pay cut? Thank you, gentlemen.
Appreciate you. Matt, who do we have presenting on behalf of the city?
Wayne Helsby on behalf of the city. Mayor, council members, good afternoon. The city, as Mr. Forehand stated, has indeed rejected the special magistrate's recommendation. It's a recommendation only. The city manager has submitted to the council members his recommendations for resolving the impasse issues. In the time that I have today, I will summarize the city's position, the reasons for the city manager to reject the special magistrate's recommendations, and address some of the union's arguments that they have made and you just heard. With regard to wages, in our view, the city's offer to the lieutenants is a fair and reasonable offer. It is consistent with that has been given to other city employees and very comparable to other jurisdictions with budgets and numbers of sworn employees similar to Port Orange. In fact, it keeps the lieutenants among the highest echelon of other lieutenants in surrounding jurisdictions. With regard to the consistency argument, at the city of Port Orange we have nearly 500 paid positions as a city. Now the unionized employees, all but 5 of the lieutenants agreed to compensation that was offered by the city. The IUPA union, which represents the 62 police officers and sergeants, agreed to an average of a 7.85% increase in fiscal year 23-24 and a 5% increase in fiscal year 24-25. NAGE, which is the union that represents general employees and non-represent general employees, received and agreed to a 5% increase in both 2023-24 and 24-25 in both those fiscal years. That raise was also given to general employees. The firefighters and lieutenants, EMTs and paramedics, represented by the International Association of Firefighters, IAFF, they agreed to an average of 9.68% increase in fiscal year 23-24 and an additional 5.3% increase in fiscal year 24-25. So the city's proposal here to the lieutenants is very consistent with what has been offered to other employees, and in many ways, arguably more. The union's argument that the lieutenants didn't receive a $1.95 increase like the police officers, well, that, as you recall, was at a time when there was a very high vacancy rate among those positions. The city was having a great deal of difficulty attracting people to fill those spots and had to increase that rate of pay in order to attract individuals into that. And the city, in fact, has built in to the increase that we have offered to the lieutenants, that $1.95. The longevity bonus that they suggest they didn't receive, you might recall that that was actually COVID monies that were distributed to employees. The city made the decision to give COVID relief monies to frontline personnel. The city's focus was on rank and file employees, not supervisors or managers. And in fact, in the fire department, division chiefs and battalion chiefs did not receive those monies in the same way that the lieutenants did not. The historic wage increases, I think, are important to point out of what the city has given to the lieutenants. The lieutenants have gone from a salary of $79,181 as of October of 2019 to $98,940 if the city's most recent offer is adopted. So with the wage increase, lieutenants will be making close to $100,000 a year. It's a fair and reasonable offer that is consistent with that which the city has agreed to with the other unions and given to the non-represented employees. As it relates to the comparators, in our view, the appropriate comparators are municipalities in contiguous counties, not those in North Florida or South Florida or some other place, but municipalities in contiguous counties. We made the pitch to the special magistrate that the four contiguous counties that Port Orange and Volusia County pays attention to is Brevard, Lake, Seminole, and Volusia counties. Of those contiguous counties that have municipalities with lieutenants in their jurisdictions of comparable size, we view the cities of DeLand and Titusville and Leesburg and Altamont Springs as being the most comparable. If you look at those particular jurisdictions, those again are municipalities in contiguous counties. Port Orange is the highest, the absolute highest with its proposed increase. Specifically, Port Orange has offered a salary of $98,940 to the lieutenants. The next highest is Leesburg at $97,041. Titusville is at $90,000 and some change. DeLand is even lower at $82,801. And Altamont Springs is $72,180. So we're at the very top of the other comparable agencies that we've looked at. And by the way, Mr. Forehand suggested that those figures were out of date. We take issue with that. We were very careful in terms of contacting these agencies and determining exactly what their rates were, made public records requests, and got the most recent available data. So we think those statistics that I'm quoting to you and to the special magistrate are in fact very much up to date. We also look at all municipalities in those contiguous counties, in those four contiguous counties, not just the ones that we think are comparable in size. So if you look at the municipalities in those counties, many in Volusia County, like New Smyrna Beach, Ormond Beach, Daytona Beach Shores, South Daytona, among others. If you look at all of those surrounding jurisdictions, the city is the fourth highest among those 36 municipalities in those contiguous counties. The fourth highest lieutenants are being paid. The average lieutenant's salary in those jurisdictions, if you look at all those 36 different municipalities in those four contiguous counties, the average lieutenant's salary is $88,672. The city is offering $98,940. The union wants to point to Daytona and Volusia County. Respectfully, we believe they're talking apples and oranges. The special magistrate found that the city of Daytona and Volusia sheriff were the only appropriate comparators, and we don't agree. We think, again, that's comparing apples to oranges. Both of those entities are much larger agencies, as you know, with much larger budgets and much greater numbers of sworn employees. Specifically, Port Orange, the police department budget is approximately $16 million. We have 84 sworn officers and 5 lieutenants. Take a look at Daytona, the one that the special magistrate relied upon. They have a police department budget of over $54 million, 247 sworn police officers, and 10 lieutenants. Again, apples and oranges. Volusia County is even larger. The police department budget there is in excess of $134 million. 404 sworn police officers, 20 lieutenants. Much different, different agencies, and ones that are simply not comparable. There's also overtime differences. I think Mr. Forehand alluded to that at the city of Daytona, they're entitled to work overtime, and they get paid at overtime rates. Well, what he didn't tell you is that in collective bargaining, we actually offered that to the union. He suggested that instead of working a salary based on a certain number of hours, that instead we go to a system where they're entitled to overtime. They didn't want that. They flat out rejected that. They said that they liked the flexibility of having that kind of salary arrangement as opposed to working hourly and being in overtime. So that is the reason why we rejected the special magistrate's recommendation as to the wage article. She based it largely on comparisons to Daytona and to the county, which we believe are not appropriate comparators. So the bottom line is that on the wage issue, the city's offer, in our view, is fair, it's reasonable, it's consistent with what we've given to other employees, and again, it puts our lieutenants among the highest echelon of other lieutenants in surrounding jurisdictions. So we're asking you to vote to resolve that wage issue in favor of the city. We've given to you in the city manager's recommendations to resolve the impasse issues a specific article, Article 24, on wages that we are asking you to vote in favor of. That's consistent with the article that we have given to the union. It provides for a 9.72% increase. It is not retroactive, and I'll repeat that again. In our proposal, it is not retroactive to October 1, 2023, but instead effective the first full pay period following April 1, 2024. And that's important. That's what we are asking you to vote on to resolve the wage issue in the city's favor. The union suggested in the presentation that they agree with the city's stance on pension. Nonetheless, that's not really considered a tentative agreement like we had at the table with other issues. So it is an issue that, in our view, you need to resolve as well at this impasse hearing. We've given you a retirement plan article that we would like for you to vote to agree to. Again, it's in your packet that the city manager gave to you as issues to resolve this impasse issue. And it specifically outlines what the one-year proposal is for the city to deal with the pension issue. So with that, I'll conclude my presentation.
Appreciate the fact that both parties didn't push the clock. Shows the level of preparation that both parties had for us this evening, and that is very helpful for us. So that takes us to the question and answer period. We've just heard almost half an hour of testimony on top of everything that we've had we've had quite a bit to read. We've been exposed to a lot. We've been at this for quite a period of time. And this is the time where we need to ask our questions. Then we'll come back after public participation and deliberate on the course of action. With that, why don't we open up? Tracy, what have you got?
My first question is dealing with the lieutenants. I know that,
Hold on a second. If I could just ask for both parties to be at the ready, because questions go either way, and this will just help move things along.
We can share the podium.
Morning, Vernon.
No.
Might not be a bad thing either.
being the new guy on the block, asking the question first is going to be interesting. I know. But the question is coming from a business sense of mind, salary versus hourly.
Good. The response to that,
Yes.
he kind of left it hanging. We were offered to go hourly at a lower rate. Literally, we were offered to work hourly, making less money than they had already offered for us to salary. So, yes, we did reject that soundly, and we will every time.
And I understand that. If it was set in place, hourly at the same compensation where you were with increases, would you go back to hourly?
It would be something to consider, but that was never offered, right? We tried, we got one offer from the city. We started this negotiation a year ago. We received one offer from the city, broken up different ways, but still the same amount of money from the city. It was never offered. We got a last best final. We declared it passed.
Could I add to that?
Yes, sir.
So, at the negotiation
Before
table,
you do, Wayne, I'm just gonna say that if the question goes to one party, absolutely, we will have.
if that's okay. Yeah.
I'd like you to rebut, either way. We wanna hear it all.
I'm glad to witness
That's the
it.
whole
Okay.
idea of doing this.
Sure. Well, I was just going to add briefly that I wasn't at the bargaining table, but my understanding was that there were comparators made to other agencies where overtime is given to lieutenants. They work hourly and then they get overtime. And the contention was, well, make a whole lot more money, because they're working overtime, they have special details, they have all these things, especially if they don't. There's a lot of different activities and things of that nature that require off-duty work and that kind of thing, which are paid at overtime. So that's the reason why the city suggested to them that we perhaps go to an hourly rate and an overtime system. We couldn't afford to take their current hourly rates and just transform them into an existing hourly rate, their current salary, turn them into an hourly rate. But that was why it was suggested. Just wanted to add that.
Another question to that is hourly versus salary. One of my biggest concerns, going one way or another, is we're not Daytona. We do not have special events like what they do. So have y'all looked at the hours of what they're being paid overtime up there in comparison to what it would be down here?
We have. Their base salary, as we stated earlier, is about $108,000. They had a lieutenant last year making $190,000. Yeah.
Good for him.
And several above 130. But again, we understand that's what we're going to. We're not asking to make 150, right? We're asking to be paid a fair wage as the magistrate ruled.
Yeah, my concern is though they have all these special
Sure,
events
yeah.
and we don't. So if we do that, then we don't end up having that type of pay.
And we're not here asking to be put on an hourly rate, but, comparing how much they do make. We want the city to have a salary so they know what they're gonna spend each year, but we do want it to be competitive with the market.
Okay, thank you.
Let's go this way. Don't point to somebody else. Yeah, you know I'm gonna come to you now. There you go, Drew.
All right, so the hourly versus salary thing, kinda, we don't have to hash that out anymore. It was offered, wasn't quite comparable in your opinion, was rejected. Let's not beat that up. Negotiations lasted close to a year, right? Give or take?
April to October and
then towards February. The offer of best and final, which puts you up to the just shy of 99,000. I'm having a hard time, not with the rejection, but it's like you guys didn't think that was fair. Is there, the reasoning behind that, it was the highest offer to any employee. And there's a group of 5. Firemen, I think the average was 9.68, so it's about the same, but a hair higher. So I'm just having a hard time swallowing that pill when those, right, like, we vote on a raise and, people accept it, and like, I gotta pay the tax increase too. And all our constituents do, and they're not getting that 9 or 10% salary increase, or 9.7 and 5% the following year. And it's hard to look at the ratepayers and say, hey, we appreciate our cops, we're giving them 10% just for, and it's coming out of your pocket. And then, this whole ripple effect, because they take home less because their taxes are going up. So that's a hard pill for me to swallow, that, the ratepayers that are paying this are gonna bite that bullet and have to pay it. They're not gonna move, they're not gonna sell their house because you go somewhere else, and it's
And the police protection isn't as good. Yes, it's not as safe a city. You're right. The fact is, and I don't mean to insult anybody, but it doesn't matter what the percentage raise is if you're way below the going rate. You can give an 80% raise if you're 90% below the going rate. It's not going to matter. It's still not going to be competitive with other agencies, right? So maybe don't explain it as we gave them a 9.75% raise. Maybe explain it as we made them competitive with lieutenants from other agencies in our area. We don't lose officers to Titusville. We don't lose officers to DeLand. We don't lose them to whatever the other comparators the city's trying to make. You know who we lose officers to? The sheriff's office in Daytona. That's who we lose officers to.
Go ahead, fair enough.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's it for now.
Any response?
No, I think I won't beat the dead horse in terms of why we don't think those are comparators, but that's it.
Scott?
So I don't know that I really have any questions, I guess, per se. Maybe just some comments. Anything you're welcome to respond. It is a very frustrating thing from this seat every single year, whether it's with the police department, the fire department, public works departments, or anything, when we're trying to do competitive analysis and compare the so-called apples to apples thing. As you guys all well know, because you all know people that work with other agencies, just like I do, just like a lot of us up here. It gets super frustrating to try to say, here's where we need the most help. And this one right here may not be as important as that one, and try to figure that out for individuals when we're collectively trying to figure it out for the organization. Some benefits mean a lot to you that might not mean as much to the next person. If you've got 4 kids and you work for the sheriff's department, and the fact the sheriff can pick up the family health care bill, that's fabulous. I don't know how you feel about that if you don't have any kids, because that monetary benefit doesn't come back to your wallet. They get it, you get nothing for it, right? It's a frustrating thing. It is really frustrating. And like, I anguish over it a lot. I look at a lot of the benefits. I look at Daytona. You know, do we compare ourselves with Daytona? Should we compare ourselves with Daytona? And it's easy to say yes, because they're right up the road, right? But Daytona is a different agency, and they have a massive tax base that we just don't have. We're never going to have we don't have a beachside. We don't have the waterfront properties. We don't have the commercial development. We don't have the tax base Daytona has.
We also don't have the special events. Yes, we do get impacted. We know that. There's a little bit. We get impacted at a fraction of what Daytona gets. I have long thought that our lieutenants should be hourly. In fact, I may be the one who brought it up to bring to the table to say, are we looking at this thing wrong? Should we be hourly? Now, I get the argument you want to make for the hourly thing, but the reality of it is, and I can to digress for just a second, I have long, and this is just my opinion, I have long looked and thought that the best way for us to do comparisons, whether that's within our own internal structures or other agencies, is 1 hour of work for 1 hour of pay. When you start convoluting that with, well, I can work more hours over here to make more, then you're trying to justify an argument, well, I should work less and make the same as somebody else who makes a lot more. So I know that the concept, if you move from salary to hourly, it may not mean that what your defined hourly rate is currently as a salaried employee would necessarily be the same, because as we've looked at those analysis over the years, we've seen that they are lower. Then you have the fact that, and I'm just throwing out examples, you know they're infinite, I know you guys all do. You look at Daytona's pension, they're capped at $30,000 a year life.
Those $5,000.
Okay, you can respond just a second. But they have a cap that is significantly lower than our cap. Now, I know they're trying to do some other creative things with that and move and change that. I know they pay more into their pension than we do. And then you pick the sheriff's office and they pay less into their pension. And until just recently, they just changed it, but it was the 30-year deal now. If you didn't do 30 years, you're working a long time to try to get to anything that you get too much sooner here. My point to that, El, is that I'm just echoing to you guys that it is hard. We spend a ton of time trying to look at all those different benefits and you're right. I know you mentioned it's about a cumulative package. I totally get that, 100%. But it nonetheless is very difficult to always be trying to pick and choose. And I guess maybe where I'm going at is that as we do move into future negotiations and stuff, maybe it is time to really get to an hourly thing, so that portion of it, at least, if our lieutenants and the hearing officer truly believes that the way to do this is comparing hourly structure versus a salary thing, then maybe that is the better way to go. By the way, I do want to say, I appreciate all the time everybody puts into this. The lieutenants, just like all of our officers and our sergeants and our fire, you guys have never asked for anything, ever, that I've looked upon and said, that's ridiculous, or that's crazy, or whatever. It all comes down to us. How are we paying for it? How do we move that needle? Look, go back and look at the last few years. We have had significant, almost historic tax increases on our residents, by and large, to try to maintain a competitive structure for our employees in the city of Fort Orange. We haven't added a bunch of expensive, fancy programs. We haven't added positions in most cases. We've had large tax increases that have almost completely gone, not 100%, but by and large, the majority has gone to try to improve pension structures, add benefits back to pension plans, move the needle on compensations and all those things. It is very hard also to take one swing at an entire organization and fix all problems. You mentioned compression. Look, I will tell you, I'll just be bluntly honest, we know that's a problem. We get that sometimes when you make a decision, you create compression. We do that knowing we see it, and that's going to be the next thing we got to fix. There's never a finish line in any of this. I think we all know that. You got 16, I believe 16 law enforcement agencies in Volusia County. There might be 17, but 16 roughly. Every time we do something, it forces the next agency to do something, and so forth and so forth and so on. This is a never-ending thing. There's no finish line. We all know that. But we do know too that when you're trying to fix where the biggest needs are, that sometimes you will create some compression, and then that becomes a priority to correct in the next ones. You know, and so I think historically we've done pretty darn well trying to fight the compression within the organization itself. I know that you can create some, and I get it. You know, but it is something that weighs on our mind. The other thing is that it's also very hard to look at all the different benefit levels for all the agencies, including ours, and all the rank structures, and then try to say, what does this entire package really add up to, and what does it mean? But just for sake of the discussion today, the 2023 gross earnings for the lieutenants in our organization, the highest lieutenant, gross earned $102,558. The lowest lieutenant gross earned $91,146. The averaged out to $97,459. The 9.7% pay increase that was declined would have taken those same numbers and moved that average to $106,961. Now I get it, there's sick leave, sell back, I get that. Some agencies have it, some don't. How that works is different for everybody. But
That's not true.
That's my point, is I'm just saying
not
to
true.
you guys that we are totally okay with all of the benefits, the mindset, the direction, the vision you guys have. We share more of it than you probably realize. It's just hard to always get it there every single time and every single year. I think that some of the stuff that came out of the hearing officer's review, to me at least, as I've looked at it, is somehow, and I don't know how we do this, because we can't get 16 other agencies collectively together on the same piece of paper, but somehow we have to pick the apples that we do want to be apples to apples with. Whether that's salary and reduce the hours like the sheriff's office does, or hourly and allow you guys to be overtime eligible, which I always thought that was how it really probably should have been done or better, because there are some opportunities why we wouldn't have Daytona's opportunities to work that kind of overtime. I do think there would still be some, but you know, I get it that that's something for you guys to still talk about in future years of negotiation with that. Let's see what else I have here. I know you mentioned about a 2-year deal. I got to tell you, I don't know that that's good for any of us right now, because I think there's more to work on here. You know, so regardless of what happens, I don't think that that's a good deal for them. I think that a 1-year deal is a better option right now for us and for them, because it allows us to get back and start working on some of these other things. So that doesn't bother me at all. Right? That doesn't bother me at all. I just as soon get back to negotiation and start working on a lot of these things that have come to light during this entire process, you know. Yeah, it takes a lot of time, I get it, and it takes a lot of their time, staff time, and everybody's time. The pension thing, the only thing I wanted to mention about that is, do we have anything in our pension plan that is a benefit that is structured by rank?
No, but by tier. All of the lieutenants are tier 1.
Right.
That was.
Okay. Well, it just for that, I mean, this council would love nothing more than not to have tiers. And eventually, at some point, those will be gone, right?
Well, yeah, because tier 1 will age out and
Right,
retire.
that's exactly right, yeah.
Right, but all the changes were for tier 2, who have 10 to 15 years before they retire. Which
Right,
is
because
why
that was something, by and
the
large.
lieutenants were at the end of their career. The lieutenants are the ones who signed under one deal,
Right.
had it removed from them, and benefits removed. The tier 2
Quite
guys,
familiar.
I know you,
Yeah.
because you had to retire as
Yeah.
a result, to
Right.
protect what you had.
Yeah.
Right? The tier 2 guys all signed on the dotted line, these are my benefits. And we've now improved the benefits for them and not addressed the guys who got the rug pulled out from under them. That's the biggest issue with the lieutenants
Right.
and the pension changes, right? We've increased benefits for guys who never asked for it. Or they were asking for it, but who signed on the dotted line, and we've never taken anything away from them. But the lieutenants signed on the dotted line under one promise, and a previous council took that away.
But if I could add, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I wouldn't just.
Go ahead.
If I might add to that, what he didn't mention though is that the lieutenants came to us with improvements to the pension plan proposed that were of benefit to them. And our response was, we need to look at those. We need to have an actuarial look at those and study them and make sure we know the costs before we move forward. In fact, that's required by law, and the special magistrate agreed with that. So we have actually began that process. So it's not like we've told them no. We've said we'll look at it. We just need to know what those costs are going to be before we can commit to something like that.
And I would just, and we'll move on past that, but I would just add that for me, that as I have always looked at that pension plan and the benefits, and I know you've even argued it when you were at a different rank, is I've always looked at that as an organizational thing, like never like, you know, because if you're in the pension plan, you're in the pension plan, in my opinion, as a member of the plan. You're not there as an officer, a detective, a lieutenant, a sergeant, or whatever. I get as you go through the longevity of your career that you go to those ranks and those positions and things like that, and your pay enhances the pension benefit. So I've got that. I'm just sharing with you that I've never looked at it. It's an interesting thing, and I get what you're saying. I'm following. I get what you're saying right now. It's an interesting thing to look at different benefits, either by rank or by a different tier structure, and something in the future, I guess, we can look at. I don't know, I guess, you know, when the pension plan is in play, we've tried really hard to protect the pension plan. You guys, I know you serve on the board, you guys have done an amazing job helping to get the pension plan to a point where we can even discuss improvements to the pension plan. So you should be congratulated for that. The taxpayers should be acknowledged for the amount of money that they have put into the plan, additional funding over and above year after year after year, and all those kind of things to get it back. Because when I did get on this council, as you well know, it was ugly. There's no other way to put it. It was a disaster. So anyway, I'm just going to conclude with, I don't really have a question. I'm just going to conclude that I want you to know that everything you guys have asked for is a warranted ask. I've never seen anything where I look at something and go, that's just utterly ridiculous. Some of the struggles I have is when we're trying to pick the apples off the different trees and all the different agencies, and this agency is this and that one. And that's not right, wrong, or indifferent. It's just a frustrating thing because collectively I try to look at all of that. So that's all.
Yeah, and to your point, depending on what we do today, and we could be back at the table working on the next one next week, and all these will be issues that even if we're not working on it here and now, it positions us in the light of hearing all the testimony to prepare us. Hopefully we start the next round not at step 1, but step 3 or step 4 because of that. Certainly would think that we would all be better for it.
Can I just respond to a couple of things he said?
Uh-oh, look out.
Or no?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
That's okay. Yeah, first, the compression thing. So the lieutenants have, as you said, never asked, we haven't come, we haven't complained. But we watched ourselves lose $18,000, $18,500 over 2 years in benefits, right? We watched lose the $1.95, which computes out to be about $4,300 a year, right? Let to the rank and file that they all got, 5 got, at least did, the lieutenants did, right? So now the ask, that's over $22,000 per lieutenant on average. Now the ask for all 5 lieutenants is $20,000. It's a deal, and it is surprising to me, number one, that we were so quick to reject the magistrate's order, and number two, to make it clear, the compression didn't just happen. It's been happening, right? And this was our chance to address it, and so we're trying to.
Despite what you might think, I did not forget you, Reed.
I was just wondering if you were still asking questions or if we moved on. I didn't know.
Well, I don't, you're good, okay then?
No, absolutely no, I'm not good.
Okay. I tried. Go ahead.
My first question that I want to ask, and both of you can take a swing at this, the concern with the data being old. You said it was from 2022. I mean, obviously we were at the table in 2023. Now it's 2024. So, what makes you feel confident in that data? Actually, it's probably a question for Wayne. Wayne, is our data from 2022 that we've been receiving?
That was a question that was asked at the special magistrate hearing, specifically of our witness, John, from the city, and he was the one that collected the data.
Okay.
He testified under oath that he made it a point to not only talk to each of these jurisdictions, as many as he could get on the phone, but also make public records requests from them to make sure that he was receiving the appropriate, current, up-to-date data. So he testified under oath, that's all I can tell you, that in fact is the current, up-to-date data. And the union presented nothing other than some speculation that it wasn't current. They didn't produce any other documents to refute what we had put together. It was left unrefuted. So my only way to respond to you is that we think the data is current, up-to-date.
Warren, definitely, feel free to speak.
I'd just like to see if the question could be asked. When was the data originally collected? Because we gave you the stats for the most recent pay raise for Daytona, which was April of 2023. Again, when was the data collected? Because if the data was collected in 2022, which realistically, that's what you'd be looking at when you're going to the bargaining table in 2023, you're looking at the last completed fiscal year. Okay, that's 2022 data. And we all know in this today's market for law enforcement, wages are going through the roof. People are competing, wages are going up in I'll give you just one example in Cocoa. We were in the middle of a contract, okay? The city came to the union and said, we'd like to give your officers an extra 10% pay raise, in addition to what was agreed to at the bargaining table. And they did give that. So the data was from 2022, and you can go compare it yourselves to see where they're at this very moment, but it's ever changing.
Well, if I could respond to that just briefly. Again, the question was asked, when did you collect the data? And he responded to it. Said it's being collected as we went along through bargaining and even in preparation for the special magistrate hearing. If the union had come to the special magistrate hearing and said that data is wrong, and here's the real data, we got this record from a neighboring city through a public records request, and it's wrong. Your data, that'd be one thing, but there was none of that. Absolutely none of that. It was left unrefuted. They just came up and said, oh, I think that data's wrong. Well, I'm sorry, but it's right. And it was testified under oath that it is right, and there was nothing to put into the record that was put into the record that ever refuted that. That's all I have to say.
Two things with respect to counsel here. First, we testified first then, so there was nothing, we didn't know, number one, that they were going to bring in all these new comparators. Number two, we presented our case first. There wouldn't be anything to put in the record if we didn't know what they were going to present, which we did. Third, I personally did the public records request for the Daytona salaries and every other unit, law enforcement unit in the county. Did it myself. They're in my email. The numbers from Daytona and the sheriff's office matched the end of 2022 when I filed it, December of 2022. The numbers were exactly the same.
So my follow-up question to that, you said you reached out to all
I did,
agencies.
the public records.
Why did you only choose to include Daytona and the sheriff's office and not any of the others?
I didn't.
Okay.
I pulled them
They
all.
just
The
didn't
land,
respond.
in fact, we presented at the magistrate hearing the land salaries because he's giving you that they're $84,000. Almost all of their lieutenants were in the high 90s in 2022, W-2s.
After overtime.
Because I want to stick to questions here, but a big
Right.
thing for me, and I'm using our city attorney as an example, who I find to be extremely valuable to our organization. I did not vote for him to get a raise 2 years ago. I voted against him getting a raise. And the reason was because I had no data.
Right.
I had nothing in front of me that said, here's what city attorneys are being paid, or here's what people on the outside, or outside councils being paid. The only decisions I can make from my seat are ones I believe that are firmly with intelligent data in front of me that's reliable. And I think that's a big thing as we're negotiating in sometimes in the past and going into the future. It's like buying a car. Everyone keeps saying apples, and I'm not going to see an apple again for at least a week or two here, or an orange for that record. But it's like buying a car. You have to be able to have the numbers in front of you, and you have to believe that you're on the same page. You guys clearly believe Daytona and Volusia are the two, rightful comparators, and then the city's bringing forward, 36 apparently, which is, a lot to go through in and of itself. So that's why I'm asking that question, because I definitely agree with everyone that we have to be able to rely on the data in front of us. Otherwise, we're negotiating blindly on both sides. So.
I would like to say that that was the purpose of going to the special magistrate. They're a neutral person. She got to hear both presentations, see all of the data, and that's why you are provided, obviously, with the special magistrate's recommendation. I would hope that you could trust the impartial special magistrate.
If I might add to that too, that's the whole purpose of going to a special magistrate too, is to present data on comparable agencies. They had to have known that we were going to not confine it to simply Daytona and Volusia. And that's what we presented, was for agencies that we felt were comparable as opposed to these other agencies. I said it.
Okay, and I still have a few more questions. And this is probably another Wayne question. Is it true that there'll be sergeants in our agency that are going to make more than our lieutenants this year? Is that?
I don't know the answer to that. I'd probably have to have John or somebody.
Do we know that information?
Probably with overtime, I bet they will. Probably are.
With overtime, there
I'm
were
not saying it's
four,
overtime.
there were four last year.
There were 4 last year.
With overtime.
That included overtime.
That did include overtime,
Oh,
absolutely.
okay.
Because
Absolutely.
the one thing I will say about the this impasse process, which I don't think any of us are enjoying, no one wants to be here where we are. It has opened my eyes to a lot of things from the other side of the table that I wish I knew sooner, and things that I want to definitely apply. There's a lot of things that have been unearthed, that knowledge that has come forward about the feelings on the other side of the table that I want to be able to have that information going forward, and I'm really looking forward to being able to apply that information. That being one of those things, I find that very interesting. And then this can be a yes or no question, but so the proposed increase is 9.72%. It's about $8,000, as I understand it. Which, if the $1.95, that works out to be about $4.43. So it's about half $1.95, and the other half from there, if I'm understanding correctly. Would you guys agree? I'm doing the math myself. I'm saying that from
That
where
sounds
we
about right.
Sounds
Yeah.
about
The
right.
way you're explaining the math, it sounds about right.
I just want to make sure we're all kind of on that same page.
Yeah.
That $1.95 in there. So then, ergo, it's about half an increase to do that $1.95, another half from there. So, okay.
Maybe a little bit less.
Yeah, I'm
Yes,
I'm
no answer,
rounding
but yeah.
for the sake of
Gotcha.
moving this conversation along. All right, I'm good on questions for now.
For myself, I think you guys have done a pretty good job of hitting most of the salient points. And I do think that there's one salient point that we have to discuss is, among us, when it comes back to us, is the fact that we're impasse in the first place and where we're going to be after the impasse and what we're starting with. Because quite frankly, one of the things that through discovery, through the whole process, and through presentation and question tonight is wages are important. Wages are what we're going to decide tonight, but it is actually a, shall I use the fruit analogy again? Don't use the fruit.
I'd be careful.
Anything but fruit.
One grape and a bunch of many, one piece of a bigger apple, should I keep going? Thanks, Reed, you started this. And I think that prepares our conversation when we do go back to the table. It certainly helps us up here, but at the same time, at the end of the day, we're not deciding all those things today. That knowledge will be helpful. We know that they're going to get work done regardless, and certainly I think we're all committed to that. I think that we also have to deal with the reality of what we do at an impasse and how that can affect future negotiations. And frankly, unless everybody up here loses their mind, I do like the fact, as much as I don't like this process, I do like the fact that what we're talking about is how much of a raise we're going to be giving instead of if, because that was a big conversation point coming out of a Great Recession. And I was a newbie council person at the time, and we were cutting a lot of things to the bone. Wayne Clark, who was around as the department head at the time, knows that we cut a lot of things probably too close to the bone. That was exemplified where we were coming out of the Great Recession. but I trust the judgment that my counterparts have here in listening. And I want to thank all four of you for asking good questions. I think good questions come with good create good knowledge, and I think we all have a better take on the entire situation. And with that, I'll allow either of you to comment on what I've had, and then we'll go to the public.
I know lawyers aren't usually brief, but I'm done.
That's scoring points, I'm not a lawyer.
But you dressed up like
Carmen.
that. Also. You
Yeah,
look good.
not so much.
We didn't address retro pay.
Right, with that,
Retro pay?
Yeah.
we come back to
What about retro
council deliberation and some form of a vote here shortly. Would anyone here from the public care to speak to the item and what we've heard and what has been said? And who are you, sir?
Good afternoon. Lieutenant Thomas Aiken, Port Orange Police Department. First, I'd like to address this talk of overtime being part of calculations and all that. Yes, we are salaried. I'll go through the time when I was a sergeant, as a patrol sergeant, traffic sergeant, CID sergeant. I worked overtime. I was on call for probably the better part of 15 years. Made a lot in overtime. As a lieutenant, we're salaried. Willingly gave that up. All of us here, all 5 of us, are leaders. We lead people. Knowingly, for us to go to an hourly rate in order to make overtime would take money away from the people we lead. We care about our people. First and foremost, that's my first job as a leader, take care of my troops. I would never take $1 out of one of my officers' mouths, or the mouths of their children. Never. Do not put us in that position. Throughout this process, and I think my compatriots can attest, I've been a voice of optimism and hopefulness. Right now, I'm down to hopefulness. Please surprise me. Thank you.
Thank you. Who else we got? Come on up, Barry.
Hi, I'm Barry Petef. I live at 5648 Bald Eagle Drive. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. I thank you all for the intense work that you've obviously done and the reflections upon where we're going with numbers. And I took a few bits of notes here, you know, and I see percents like 9.7, 7.5, 7.85, here $8,000. I guess the thing that, you know, fresh eyes and fresh ears, which I hope I represent, can ask the question. It's very simple. We talked about a special magistrate. We talked about what the union wanted. We talked about what the city is saying. Can someone in some format actually answer the question, what's the difference between the three? Special magistrate said something, that was rejected. The union recommended something, that was rejected. The city's recommending something, that's rejected. Okay, I don't have the background that you do at this point yet to know the difference between those 3 points, and I think they're very salient, and I think the public needs to know what that difference is. Thank you.
Thank you. Who else we have? Anybody but Robert? Come on up, Robert.
Mayor, council members, Robert Reinhagen, 1425 Dexter Drive North, Port Orange. The only issue I have that I like to talk about is not being retroactive. The 2 parties came together, they negotiated, passed the termination of the contract, and I think that in good faith, you have to make it retroactive. to not make it retroactive. That's an incentive for the labor to declare impasse the day the contract ends, and for management to delay forever. So I think it has to be retroactive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Last call. Okay. Public participation is now closed. That brings us to item 8. Council deliberation and vote to resolve the impasse issues. It's time for the 5 of us to have a conversation amongst ourselves and decide on a course of action. Tracy, you started last time, so you've been sitting there a long, long time.
A lot to take in.
And I hope that you have. Just comments and suggestions before I entertain a motion.
At this point, it's trying to figure out the hourly versus salary. Maybe that's the next agenda once we get this one handled at this time. I think that has a lot to do with y'all trying to do a 2-year deal versus a 1-year. I think coming forward and hearing information from the magistrate ourselves, y'all, this allows us to go into the next deal of maybe making a 2-year deal. I think we need to put this one to bed. Do it right, but then have the chips on the table, what you guys are looking at for a 2-year deal to make it fair for everybody, but making it right for you guys. I have no problems with that. But I think we're getting here on a course of where a year is almost up. So let's get this 1 year done, move on, and then try to put a 2-year deal together. Makes sense.
Scott? Thoughts?
Well, I mean, obviously, I think that the hourly versus salary thing is going to have to be a pretty in-depth discussion. Lieutenant Aiken, he brings up a good point, yet it seems like the attorney for the union is arguing that to compare it to an hourly agency, and a lot of what the hearing officer locked into was Daytona, which is hourly. So again, that's what I was talking about, is it's just such a hard thing, but I do understand, and I actually agree with what he's talking about. Like, if we can figure out, and I know we're not here today to talk about the future, but if we can figure out a structure that works in the hourly, that doesn't take things away from the officers and the sergeants, which I believe we could get there to that, then that's something we should at least take a look at. But he brings up a valid point. I just wanted to make recognition of that.
Well, let me stop you right there, and let me ask everybody a question, since you brought that up right here and now. In the process of solving this today, in imposing whatever it is we decide to do today, does anybody have an appetite for imposing a solution that changes from hourly to salary today?
No, Mayor.
Absolutely not.
Mayor, just
No, and I'm asking the question.
Procedurally, I want to touch on imposing is probably the wrong word
Okay.
today.
Well, thank you.
You'll resolve the 2 articles, that will go back to them to draft up with the tentative agreements, and that will be voted upon and maybe ratified. So today is not an imposing day.
Thank you. It was a bad choice of words. But I mean, as far as coming to a consensus, this is not something I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. Moving forward, that this is not something we want to make happen, that we're fine with the collective bargaining process playing out and doing what's right and what's fair and agreed upon with both parties. And if there were ever to be any change to that, we're all on the same page? Okay.
So,
sorry, I know I
that's
broke
okay.
train of thought, but I thought it was important to put.
So anyway, I just want to recognize Lieutenant Aiken's comment, and it's a valid comment and concern, but it's part of the perplexity, if you will, of how we're trying to figure this whole thing out. Because, like I mentioned earlier, for years we have looked at that hour of work for hour of pay concept, because it just seems to me fundamentally that's fair. Hour of work, hour of pay. And for years, what we have seen is that the lieutenants at Fort Orange have been very well in several years at the top of that hour of pay, hour of work concept. They've been the highest. And so yes, this has created some compression. Yes, you guys are salaried. Yes, you don't have the ability to work overtime. But I think as our city and our region has grown in Volusia County, it's just something we need to look at, especially if we want to continue to utilize Daytona as a comparative. So that's just a comment on my part with that. So, you know, as far as what the city offered, it's the largest pay raise that was offered collectively to any of the unions. Some of that was designed to be able to try to make up some of the compression. We well know that doesn't all happen all at one time. And the compression thing moves constantly, especially now when we're dealing with two different unions within the same organization, which is, I don't know of anybody else that does that, but that's just kind of unique in the sense of, you know, it's just a hard thing. It's just a difficult thing. But anyway, I don't really have anything else to offer with that.
I think in going into this, clearly you make a compelling argument that you prefer not to take anything away from the officers that you're leaving. And I mean, that makes sense to me. You don't want to do that. So we have you can't really compare the apples to apples, or I get it. It's a different condition, two different cities. You guys are salaried, they're hourly. Scott, I know you had some numbers. You quoted some gross numbers, 102, 103 or something, and several in the 90s. That was the gross pay, including like specialty pay and incentive pay and things like that, correct?
Yeah.
So it's like a W-2, like the attorney said, one of Daytona's lieutenants had a W-2, 190 something thousand.
198.
He was probably never home. I mean, that's a crazy amount of, but if he wanted to make that kind of money, that was his option. He didn't have to take all those overtime hours, I get that.
And his base was mid-120s, so
okay,
he's not a
so,
brand new lieutenant.
Yeah, so he's got some time in grade and has got some service. Another thing, since we, like during the negotiation, and we settled a couple other contracts, I'm sure Daytona, the county, and I think New Smyrna also gave raises. So their pay changed according to kind of what we did and where we were at. And they made, you know, they made raises that they split it up. Daytona did like October and an April thing. So that number, Scott's right, it constantly changes. And so, you know, I do want to get you guys more money in your pockets. The offer we made was turned down. I get it. You're entitled to do that. I'm in my 12th year, and you guys know, I mean, I've been supportive of employee ask and negotiations throughout. And so and looking at this, I'm going to go to the special magistrate's decision, because in her consideration of everything, I think it was a female, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In her consideration of everything, she did make, and I'm not calling her out or trying to make her look bad, but I believe, it's my opinion, she made an error, because on page 6 of her thing, we talking about take-home pay and this and that, and comparing the two. So, and this is from her report. Another factor that enhances the amount of take-home pay earned by Daytona Beach lieutenants is that they only contribute 3% of their wages to their pension plan. I verified today that is not correct.
It's not.
She considered wrong information. Daytona pays 10% of their salary to their pension plan. 10%, we're at 7.5%. I also feel like they have a 20 now, and they have some things, but they also have one. I found in the summary plan description and on Municode, I found some interesting stuff about Daytona's pension. So their officers, they have a lifetime cap, if you will, $55,500 a month, which equates to $66,000 a year. And they're, considering that at 108,414, at 3%, they're paying 3252 and some change of their salary, but it's not 3%, they're paying 10. So they actually, out of their salary, comes out $10,841.53 to support that. But here's the kicker. Currently, our pension, Tier 1, I think Tier 2 said it's a $95,000 a year cap, which equates to, if you break it down monthly, $7,916, which is about a little over 30.5% higher. So the pensions, while law enforcement is the same, the pensions are vastly different, and you can
if you don't mind.
But yeah, this is what I just found out today, and I verified.
They also have a city matched 401k that goes once they cap out.
Okay.
They stop contributing to the pension, so that 10% comes back, and the city matches their 401k for everything above that $5,500 a month.
Yeah.
That's the way Daytona's.
Well,
So they're part defined benefit and part defined contribution.
Hybrid plan, if you will.
Yes.
But it looked like from Municode, and I don't know if it's 100% accurate, but it said in Municode that once they cap at the 55, it didn't mention the hybrid plan. I didn't see that in there. I didn't read it word for word, but it said that their contribution goes to 0.5%, because I think that's Florida statute. You have to pay at least 0.5%. So they make up that they're picking up 9.5% once they're capped. But the bottom line, that the $5,500 a month, which is that's solid money in retirement. That's a good retirement, $66,000. But if our guys stick around long enough to see it, they can make a lot more in retirement. Not,
in pension payments.
Drew, hold on just a second.
Do away with the 401k.
We've already done the questions and answers, so you need to direct this with conversation
Okay.
among us.
All right. So I'm literally, the information I found out today was interesting to see, like, the comparison, but like their attorney didn't mention the pension comparison to Daytona. He did bring up the county at 3%, which is FRS. So there are some differences, but guys, I really want to put this behind us, get you guys some more money in your pocket, and work on the next contract. There's still work to do. A lot of work. I have a lot of work. I have 7 months left, and there is going to be a different council up here by the end of the year. So I'm, like I said, I want to get you something and continue to work to get you more in the time I have left.
I really didn't forget you, although Drew tried to make me forget you. Reed?
I'm sorry.
Well, I think this has been, like I said, very interesting for me. A lot of things that have sort of unsurfaced throughout this process that I definitely, I don't want to say that I wish I knew them sooner, although I do, but I definitely plan on utilizing that information going forward. There's some things I'm going to want to know during those next negotiations. I know, so we're not here to talk about the future, but in reality, there seems to be a temperature in the room, so I think we are talking about the future a lot right now.
It's always about the future.
Well, always. And it's about the past. I actually was looking, a concern of mine economically about everyone is salary compression, not just against peers and people in necessarily the same department here, but in regards to just, economics in the everyday world. The number from 2019, the salary for the lieutenants was $79,000, and if you calculate inflation today, that would be $96,456, based on all the inflation numbers we've had, which we all know inflation's been hot. There's a lot of salaries that have been eroded.
when we come at 98,000, that's actually above inflation. So in theory, $1 in 2019, we're still, it's still worth $1 today, actually worth just a little bit more if we end up at 98,000. The question that I've had to deal with here, there's been a couple of things. First off, I want to make sure everyone understands how serious I do take this. We're talking about real people's lives and real people's wallets, and those don't lie. I want everyone to make as much money as possible. That's always how I've been. I'm very much a capitalist and very proud of that. I'm very passionate about law enforcement. I'm very passionate about public safety in general. I've voted for raises every year since I've gotten here, and support them, and support the tax increases to pay for them. You know, the problem with passion, it's actually a quote from Ben Franklin from 1775, that passion often governs but doesn't govern wisely. And we have to be very careful about when we're voting on things, what message we're sending to an entire organization. This is, the city's number is the highest percentage in front of us. That's something that I've definitely been keenly aware of as we've gone through this. And I've had to ask myself, you know, this comes down to, do I think these are fair wages? Because public employment, public service is not always a glamorous job at every level, whether it's our lieutenants, our police officers, our firefighters, our people who dig ditches, our people who work in water and sewer, even people who are answering phones here at City Hall. Everyone, especially to me, our law enforcement, deserve praise. And with that praise should come fair wage increases. I have no problem supporting those. I do personally believe that the number the city presented as a best and final, which we've already budgeted for, we've already put a millage out and voted and approved that. I do believe that at this time that is fair, but I also believe that the past hearing has brought a lot of things forward that we need to be looking at in the very next negotiation. And I do think it's important that we don't forget what we've heard here today and what we've heard in the past couple of meetings. I actually went back and watched some of the special magistrate hearing myself. I think we need to make sure that we keep all of that front of mind when we go to the table again, hopefully very, very soon.
I will say this, that so many times we hear great ideas, it comes down to, okay, now we got to pay for it. So that's the balancing act for us, is that what is fair, what is just, and we also have to be respectful to people that have to pay for it. But of course, it's those people that we're here and talking about serving, you know, the people who serve our citizens. I would very much like us to come out of the next negotiation with a 3-year contract, not a 2-year, but that's not necessarily up to me. I would like the certainty of that. I don't like being in an adversarial relationship with our own people constantly. That is, I think, troublesome to all of us on both sides. If we provide certainty, then we can all go out and serve and do our jobs with best intentions, without, you know, I was going to use a fruit again, Ruth, but this time I'll use the carrot over your head. I'll go to a vegetable this time. In all seriousness, we're human beings. And when you send somebody out to do their job, and they've got something in the back of their head, how can that not affect them? I get that. So at the end of the day, we have to do something today that solves this issue, but on a very temporary basis, because we're going right back to the table to talk about a lot of things that came up today. I certainly I'm not fond of where being at impasse has put us. You know, it stops Yeah, that's another reality that I also have to consider, is what happens if I go beyond recommendations, if I've got recommendations from the city, I've got recommendations from the union. They, both of them mirror parts of an entire recommendation from an impartial arbiter. I don't even know who that is. All I know is that I spent an awful lot of time reading what she wrote, more than once. So with that, what it is that we're going to do today is hopefully a beginning, not an ending. But there again, that's going to be up to everybody. At this point in time, I would like to entertain a motion. Did you? Scott, I don't know. I think we all are pretty much agreed what our focus is on, is taking care of wages today. Is there doing something for wages today and an implementation date? Is there anything outside of that scope of the recommendation that we also want to address, or no?
No, I'm looking down this way.
Well, remember, we only have the two options that were in past, the Article 24 wages, Article 25 retirement plan.
Right. That's what, but I mean, in talking about, we don't have it, does anybody here have an appetite on pensions right now? Okay. And I think because it was already given, so what we're talking about right now is wages.
Mayor, I'm sorry, could I interrupt? I think we're in agreement too as councilors that even though the union has agreed with the city's position on pension, we all could obviously take a different approach, but since we've agreed, you still have to vote to resolve that impasse issue.
Yeah.
Okay? I mean, it would obviously wouldn't be controversial, I don't think, because we're on the same page.
Yeah, because we're really not changing.
But the position, we are taking a position, and I'm just making sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that.
So with the so it's not that we're not taking a position, our position is to maintain the status quo. Is that the proper language?
Well, the thing that
I'm looking at Matt.
Yeah, so you have a draft article in front of you that the city has proposed. That's not exactly the status quo because there were some changes
that were already TA'd. Yeah.
Well, that were bargained for your other union that are then reflected in that article that was proposed by the city. So you don't have to do what the city has recommended, but there is a recommendation that resolves the Article 25 pension, I should say retirement plan article, to implement those three changes that were already negotiated by IUPA and approved by you.
And that's what I'm trying to figure out, is making sure that we're all in agreement before we make a motion.
I want to resolve both.
Based on that recommendation.
What's in front of me, yep.
Well, I'm looking to, Drew, looks like you're fired up and ready. Why don't you make the motion, course of action, if you're ready to do it.
Move that we resolve today what we have in front of us pertaining to Article 24 wages, Article 25 retirement plan, which is what the recommendation came from the city manager. And I'd like to vote to take care of those today.
And just to clarify what you're saying, you're moving to approve the Appendix A and Appendix B that were the recommendations of the city manager to resolve these two articles today?
Yes, sir.
And that's your motion?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and proper second. Discussion. Are we satisfied with that, or are there any other amendments? I'm hearing no discussion. Main question, call the roll.
Councilman Foley?
Yes.
Councilman Grubbs?
Yes.
Councilman Bastian?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Stelter?
Yes.
Mayor Burnett?
Yes, 5-0. I appreciate everybody, your time, your energy, and your passion.
So no retro?
We'll get right back to it. Thank you.
Does that include no retro?
No retro, no nothing.
So no retro. Is that what that was?
Special magistrate ordered 1032. We agree.
No retro? No retro.
I didn't see what was in it. What was the article?
The city manager recommended 98,000 and no retro.
Independent person.
We've already 6 months in.
So they couldn't even give a check.
Oh, they could.
No, I mean, well, obviously.
So, yeah,
So their
pretty much all your
percentages are-
sergeants will make more than all your lieutenants.
I might still.
Share with you that I'm a candidate for city council.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you, sir.
And if I